Work in coffee long enough, and someone will make a joke about how one particular coffee variety has the same name as a style of American whiskey.
Is there bourbon in that coffee?
Absolutely not.
Like me, for a moment, you might wonder why these two things share the same name. Is it a coincidence, a kind of homonym, or something else? Is it meaningful that bourbon whiskey is pronounced differently to bourbon coffee? And, after thinking about it for a moment, just like me, you'll probably forget about it and carry on with your day. They are, however, connected. The midpoint being one of the great royal families and dynasties in Europe, a house that ruled France for 200 years. Among them is one of the most famous kings of France, Louis XIV, known as the Sun King. That same family lineage continues today and is the current monarchy in Spain. This is the House of Bourbon. Let's start with whiskey. Bourbon's history is muddy and disputed. There are two claims as to where its name came from. The obvious one is Bourbon County in Kentucky. Folklore says that in the early 1800s, whiskey was shipped in barrels from the county, and those barrels were marked with Old Bourbon. That was the name that people used for that county. Now, Bourbon County was given its name as acknowledgement for the assistance that Louis XVI and the French gave during the American Revolutionary War. And in fact, the capital of the county is named Paris. Bourbon does have another claim for the name. Kentucky whiskey sold well in New Orleans as a cheap alternative to the more expensive cognac, and it was sold on the now famous Bourbon Street. That street was also named for the ruling House of Bourbon, and New Orleans itself was named after the Duke of Orleans, who acted as regent of France until Louis XV came of age. That explains the whiskey, but what about coffee? May 9th is the Saint's Day of Santa Apollonia in Portugal. On that day in 1507, a Portuguese crew landed on an island off the coast of Madagascar. They decided to name the island Santa Apollonia. Much later, it became a stopover for vessels on the way from Yemen to Indonesia, and as such, coffee ended up being planted on the island. That coffee would mutate, and when it was exported back to Brazil, it took the name of the island. Now, that coffee wasn't named for Santa Apollonia, because in 1642 the French had colonized the island, primarily to house 12 mutineers from Madagascar. They had renamed the island Bourbon, naming it for the ruling family of the time, the House of Bourbon. And that is how coffee, whiskey, and the Sun King all came to share a name.